So in short, we've come to the conclusion that the truth is that which conforms to reality. Truth is exclusive and absolute. Sometimes it hurts, and we can know the truth too. Some people have the idea that you can only know the truth through repeatable, testable scientific experiments or something like that. There's only two problems with that. When you're making the statement that something can only be known experimentally, that statement can't be known experimentally. That's simple. And for another thing, I'd imagine everybody in this room knows that George Washington was the first president, but you can't test that. You take that by faith on the basis of reliable testimony and trustworthy sources. So the truth is knowable. So now we come to the issue, what is truth? Which religion is true? Well, one way of going about this would be to evaluate the truth claims of each religion one by one and see which of them conforms to reality. But like I said, we're on about a 30-minute time limit, and we can't exactly do that tonight. But notice with our definition of truth firmly in place, all we have to do is show that one particular claim is correct, and that claim will exclude its opposite. Every religion happens to make a claim about the true identity of Jesus. Muslims claim that he was a great prophet, and in fact he was the Jewish Messiah. When you ask them if they think he was God, they'll say, heck no. Same thing goes for Jewish folks. They hold that he was neither the Messiah nor God in the flesh. And the same goes for Hindus and Buddhists and the like. Not surprisingly, the only religion that holds that Jesus was nothing short of God is our very own. If in fact Jesus is God, every other religion is mistaken. If Jesus is not God, then we are gravely mistaken. So the stakes are great. So how do we know whether Jesus was truly God? Allow me to present you with an argument. I said a few moments ago that if you have reliable sources, you can know something happened in history with certainty. So how do we know if the Gospels provide accurate testimony about Jesus? Well, you see how accurate these guys are as historians. We turn first to Luke. Luke wrote Acts as well as his own Gospel. He's a fascinating individual. He was very intelligent. He was a doctor, physician. He happens to probably be the best writer of the New Testament. His Greek is very well written. But most importantly, he's considered an historian of the first rank. They didn't have footnotes back then, but if you read Luke's writings closely, you'll notice that this guy's whipping out obscure geographical facts left and right. In the book of Acts, Luke references 32 countries, 54 cities, and 9 cities with pristine, archaeologically confirmed historical accuracy. He talks about wind direction, water depth, the names of numerous governors and regions. This guy is just anal. And it's all been historically confirmed by archaeology. He is right on. So here's the thing. Luke wrote Acts. He also wrote the Gospel. The Gospel is written in a similar historical style. And in the first chapter, he claims that his sources are eyewitness testimonies of Jesus. And he said that he carefully checked to make sure that what he wrote was true. What all this means is that if Luke was a good historian, we have good reason to believe that what Jesus said in the Gospels is what he actually said in real life. Now, I'm not claiming that the Bible is inerrant or inspired. I happen to believe that, but that's not necessary for the argument I'm going to make. All you have to accept is that the Gospels are at least historically reliable, or moderately historically reliable. So what kind of things does Jesus do in Luke? Well, it just so happens that Matthew and Mark are very similar to Luke. They tell about the same storyline. So if Luke is incredibly accurate, it follows that Mark and Matthew, if they have the same storyline, are probably accurate as well. So we need to evaluate what Jesus does and says in those 3 Gospels. Well, he forgives sins, even though every good Jew knew that only God and God alone could forgive sins. At the end of Matthew, he says that all authority on heaven and earth had been given to him. Then he accepts worship on at least 9 different occasions, even though that was blasphemous if you weren't God. And so Matthew, Mark, and Luke are obvious. Jesus truly believed that he was God incarnate. And so when you move to the Gospel of John, things get even more insane, Jesus' statements. He claims the very name of God in John 8:58. He says, I am. And in John 10:30, he says, I and the Father are one. So it's clear from the Gospels that Jesus thought he was God. And so that leads us to a bit of a dilemma. I said either Jesus' claims were true or they were false. This argument has been advanced by C.S. Lewis. He's the guy who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. So, we have two alternatives. Either Jesus was true in his statements and his actions about being God, or he was false. Like I said, there's no middle ground in the truth war. If he's true, he's Lord. If he's false, okay, then we're left with two options. Either Jesus was the most rotten liar and the progenitor of the most elaborate hoax of all time for having misled billions of people, or else he was a deranged nutcase for sincerely believing that he was God and being wrong. Okay? Actually, I'll call it lunatic. Notice that those are our three options. You'll hear a lot of people say that, well, Jesus was just a great moral teacher, but he hasn't left that option open to us. Either Jesus was Lord and God, or else he was a liar or lunatic. Okay? So we need to evaluate, was he liar, lunatic, or Lord? So first, was he a liar? It's interesting. I've read a lot of atheistic books. I've read books from other people's religions, and I've talked to a lot of people who are hostile towards Christianity. But I have never, ever heard anyone say a single bad word about Jesus' moral character. In fact, you'll have atheists bash you because you're not acting very Christ-like. Mahatma Gandhi said that, in the words of Jesus, we have the finest moral teaching ever uttered. So quite simply put, Jesus is considered to be the most upstanding individual and the greatest moral teacher who has ever lived. Jesus' record is utterly spotless. So just how likely does it seem that Jesus was lying about his most important claim? Whoops. How likely does it seem that the same man who said we ought to pray for our enemies, turn the other cheek, and love others as we love ourselves was the same mastermind behind the greatest hoax the world has ever seen? And here's the clincher. If Jesus truly was morally spotless, what got him killed? The Jewish law said that anybody who claimed to be God must be executed. Maybe he was executed for claiming he was God, because he hadn't done anything wrong. And finally, it's pretty clear that Jesus was confident in the fact that he was God. Psychologists tell us that it's virtually impossible for somebody to die willingly for something they knew to be untrue. Okay? Do you suppose Jesus would endure the crucifixion if he knew that he wasn't God? And what about the disciples? They knew that Jesus, if he had sinned just once, he could not provide atonement for their sins. They spent over 3 years with him day and night and were willing to die for the fact that he was sinless. So was Jesus a liar? No. Was Jesus a lunatic? Well, if a lunatic could utter the most profound and oft-quoted words of all time, then I guess, yes, Jesus could be a lunatic. But how likely does that seem? And we haven't even taken into account what we looked at last week. The Old Testament makes dozens of prophecies that only one person in the entire human race has ever fulfilled. The Messiah was to be from the seed of the woman, of the seed of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the root of Judah, the line of Jesse and the line of David. He was to be born in Bethlehem, be preceded by a messenger, minister in Galilee, enter the temple triumphantly, preach to the poor, shepherd his people, be king and judge and prophet and priest, be anointed by the Holy Spirit, be sinless, hated, mocked, pierced, provide atonement for sins. He was to be resurrected. And from Daniel 9:25, Messiah the Prince was to arrive precisely at March 30th, 33 AD, the very day in which Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey as public proof that he was God's anointed one. So the odds of any one man fulfilling just 8 of these prophecies would be like covering the state of Texas in silver dollars up to your knees, shuffling them with a bulldozer, marking a single silver dollar with a red dot or whatever you want to mark it with, and having a person randomly find that silver dollar in the state of Texas. Okay? One society has offered a $1,000 reward for anyone who can point to any person other than Jesus, living or dead, who fulfilled just half the prophecies. In our first message, I said that God's fingerprints were all over the universe. Last week, we found that his prints are all over the Bible. And just as every set of prints is unique, in the same way, only Jesus of Nazareth matched the prints of the Jewish Messiah.